The Darrell Bevell Raiders OC rumors are really starting to heat up. Coming up here on the Raiders Report today, I'm going to get into the latest around Bevel and why he might be the number one name to consider to be the Raiders' next OC. If you're like, Mitch, who the heck is Darrell Bevell? I'll tell you everything you need to know about him. And then at the very end of today's show, why these rumors and why I'm confident that Bevel could end up being the next OC for the Silver and Black. According to Vic Tafur, all signs point to the Raiders hiring Bevel. This is something that Tafur ended up tweeting out on January 31st. So when you just see the fact that this is something that's already being talked about, you got to take a look at it and you got to go, okay, interesting. Adam Schefter earlier this week, Bevel is under consideration for the Raiders. He said that on the Pat McAfee show. And also, Bevel has just always been considered the front runner for the job. The moment that Pete Carroll got hired, the moment John Spytek got hired, the moment we started hearing about OC candidates, the first name that really started to pop up, Darrell Bevell. And here's the thing. If the Raiders hire Bevel, I'm going to be live here on this channel. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications because I don't want you to miss it. And it's actually funny. At the moment that I'm recording this video right now, the Raiders have officially announced Patrick Graham as the DC, which I love to see. Just like we went live for the DC news with PG, we will be live here. Whoever the Raiders hire to be the OC, I promise you this, we will be here. So coming up, who is Darrell Bevell, and why should Raider fans know exactly who this person is? I'm going to go through, I'm going to tell you how old he is, I'm going to tell you his coaching history, everything there is to know around the Miami Dolphins quarterback coach and pass game coordinator. He is 55 years old currently, which I don't feel like I've ever talked about age more in my Raiders Report history since the Raiders have hired a 73-year-old guy in Pete Carroll. But I do think it's important to throw out age considering the fact that we have to look at a potential succession plan with every coordinator that we bring in. He's been coaching in the NFL since 2000, and he also has had some interim head coach experience in 2020, taking over for Matt Patricia, who was another just disaster New England Patriots guy hiring. Did not work in Detroit. And then also in 2021 in Jacksonville when the Jags tried to bring in a big name by the name of Urban Meyer. So I don't want you to look at what Bevel has done in terms of an interim head coach because he was taking over two horrific situations. What I do want you to look at, though, here is his entire coaching history because I do think it paints a pretty picture of what the Raiders are trying to get moving forward. Now, realistically, the ones that I want you to look at are Packers and Vikings. Here's where he had the opportunity to work with somebody like a Brett Favre. The Seahawks OC gig from 2011 to 2017 is the biggest reason why Bevel's name is being linked here to Pete Carroll with the Raiders right now, but he does have some OC, interim head coaching experience, and he's been with the Miami Dolphins over the past few seasons. But if we're going to talk about OC, let's talk about what he has done as an offensive coordinator. And I didn't want to bring up total yards. I don't want to bring up anything besides points per game. I'm sick and tired of not putting points on the board, and I don't want any more excuses. I want points on the board. So when you see the first year that he took over here in Minnesota, they were 26 in the NFL. Slowly got better, and then that final year, is when they had like the 40-year-old Brett Favre. It just simply did not work. But what I like here is slowly got better and had a great running game, compliments of, again, Adrian Peterson. But then you look at what he did from 2011 to 2017 with Pete Carroll. 7 seasons in total. He did get let go by Pete, which is something that a lot of people bring up. But again, you're looking at consistent offense, even in 2016, 2017. Like, the 18th best offense isn't great, I get that. But if you have a legit defense, you can still win football games in the National Football League. Now, Bevel, in terms of Detroit and Jacksonville, not pretty. And there's no other way to paint that picture. And I do believe that a lot of Raiders fans are concerned about bringing in Bevel because he did get fired by Pete Carroll. And then the last 3 times that you see him do his job, it was really bad, especially that final year in 2021. But go back and look at all the situations around Urban Meyer. That was a really bad situation in Jacksonville. So here's going to be the pinned comment on today's show. Do you want the Raiders to hire Bevel? Give me a yes. Give me a no. You are about to get hit with a YouTube ad break. While that ad is playing, I want you to scroll on down and give me your answer. Do you want the Raiders to hire Darrell Bevell? My answer coming up right here. I am going to say yes, because he is one of the candidates that I have been pushing for the Raiders. He is not my number one candidate. John Spytek was my number one candidate at GM. Pete Carroll was my number 3 candidate at head coach. My number one candidate that I wanted the Raiders to try to bring in was Mike LaFleur from the Rams. And because that's not a name that I'm hearing, when I hear all the other names that are being connected to the Raiders job, the best OC candidate is by far Darrell Bevell. Coming up, though, why I think he could be hired and why I ultimately wanted to do this show. I told Jeremy, again, I'm filming this on Friday, dude, there's a chance that he could get hired over the weekend, and I want to be prepared for it just like we were prepared for John Spytek, Pete Carroll. I take a lot of pride in being prepared, and I'm going to tell you why I think he's going to end up getting the job. Before I get into that, though, huge shout out to our sponsor here, Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed, and if you're shopping for the big game, one of my favorite views for the big game is this, what would you call it, Stadium Bowl. You can just see exactly where you're sitting. That's what I like because I'm not somebody where I can envision where I'm going to be. But right here, you tell me I'm going to be on the 50. You can tell me I'm going to be up here in the nosebleeds. It helps me paint a prettier picture and know where exactly I'm spending my money. Game Time, though, if you're wondering how you can get the best prices, if you download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CHATSPORTS, you're going to be able to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. If you're wondering what time is it, it's Game Time. I love using the Game Time app because you're going to get that lowest price guaranteed on any ticket to any event. All-in pricing so you don't get slapped with crazy fees at checkout and flash deals so you can get even cheaper tickets the closer you wait to Game Time. Game Time also has this feature called the Game Time Picks, which is going to help you kind of curate and get the best seats available, best deals available, where you'll see all right, this is a top 1% deal. This is a top 10% deal. I am a shopper where I always like to know that I'm getting a good deal. I want to know that I'm getting a great deal every time. I don't care what I'm shopping for. Groceries, whether it's tickets, it doesn't matter what it is. I want to know I'm getting a great deal, and that's why I love Game Time. Huge shout out to them for sponsoring the Raiders Report. And again, all the links that I mentioned down in the comments, down in the description of today's show. So coming up here next, why I think Bevel could be hired to be the next Raiders OC. The first reason is maybe the biggest reason. Right now, he is the only name. He's really the only name that is legitimate in terms of who the Raiders could bring in. And I take myself, and I pride myself on being somebody that's on top of the Raiders. The only name that I have consistently heard is Darrell Bevell. He interviewed for the Raiders job on, I want to say, it was the 28th of January, so a little bit earlier on this week. Bo Hardigree was linked to the Raiders job, but Bo was also a part of that McDaniels regime, and Bo right now is down there in Tennessee, and I almost think that Bo's going to stay down there in Tennessee to work with Dave Ziegler, who just went to the Titans. David Shaw also was linked to the Raiders job, but Shaw just recently took a gig, and I forget where he took it recently. Where? Detroit, yeah, he just took a job at the Lions. So, that's somebody where, all right, the 3 names that I've heard, Bo Hardigree, I think, stays. David Shaw took a job. Darrell Bevell's really the only name out there. The other reason why that I think he could be hired is the Pete Carroll connection. And the Pete Carroll one it's the biggest reason why Bevel's name is being brought up. And the reason why I do these type of shows is, and the reason why I always say where there's smoke, there's fire, because the moment Carroll gets hired, you should go, who has worked with Carroll and who has worked underneath him? Well, he's got 7 seasons, 7 years of experience as an OC with Pete Carroll, a team that won a Super Bowl, a team that had an insane amount of success. Think about the amount of success you have to fire your OC after a 9-7 season. That's crazy. And I think for Raider fans out there, I would kill for a 9-7 season right now. But that was the expectation. That's how they held themselves. I think the other reason why Bevel was let go, when you listen to a lot of the comments that were made by players, it wasn't a Bevel problem. There was a major issue inside of that Seahawks locker room, and Russell Wilson might have been one of the big pillars to it. But the philosophy on how to win games on offense, defense, and how it's all tied together, Pete Carroll and Bevel have a very similar thought process in that regard. One of that's the biggest problem for the Raiders. You got to find a quarterback this offseason. So I've often said, whoever that new OC is, you better have a lot of work with a lot of quarterbacks. He worked with Brett Favre in Green Bay, worked with Brett Favre in Minnesota. 7 seasons with Russell Wilson, 5 of those he made the Pro Bowl. And let's not act like Wilson was a slam dunk NFL draft prospect. taken in the 3rd round, small overall QB. And he was really a perfect fit with Bevel and a perfect fit with Pete Carroll. He's also worked with Matt Stafford, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa. So it's a lot of different styles of quarterbacks. But when you think about some of the guys that are available in free agency, Bevel's experience is going to pay dividends here for the Raiders. Then let's go to another reason here. Organization structure. One of the things that I talked about in the video that I did with Jed Hughes was talking about from top to bottom, whether it's the front office, whether it's coaches, whether it's players, whether it's the people serving food, the janitor, everybody needs to be on the same page. And Darrell Bevell is one of those hirers that it just shows that the Raiders are just trying to prove stability and they're trying to show continuity because of the success that, Bevel has already had with somebody like Pete Carroll. I think also it goes back to the Raiders said, what is our biggest problem? It's on the offense. It's not defense. So the Raiders are keeping Patrick Graham. They're going to keep around Rob Leonard. You're going to keep some of that defensive staff, and now they're trying to give that offensive staff a brand new facelift. Plus, when you go out and consider the fact that they hired Matt Capurro, which was the name that I did a video on Friday, and it was around somebody that had, it was like 14 or 15 years experience with Pete Carroll, was with the Seahawks, but decided to leave Seattle to come join the Raiders and be that right-hand man. I don't want people to go, oh, the Raiders are just recreating that Seattle team from 2011 to 2017. I want you to think of it, we're trying to create the Legion of Doom, the Legion of Boom, whatever the hell you want to call it. But I can understand Pete believing in certain people in his organization, and that's what you got to do. You got to believe at this point. At this point, all we can do is hope. The final reason is this. I'm going to call it head coach experience. One of the things that I was told last offseason, and a lot of the Raiders Report OGs are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. The Raiders wanted to hire an offensive coordinator that had head coaching experience because they knew Antonio Pierce was a defensive-minded guy and he wanted to concentrate on the defensive side of the football, where then whoever they brought in as OC could also be that head coach of the offense, allowing AP to run the defense. They wanted Cliff Kingsbury. It did not work out. But again, Cliff had some of that head coaching experience. The fact that Bevel has worked with 2 interim head coaching situations and both of those organizations at the time were just a complete dumpster fire. And the fact that 2 different NFL teams felt confident enough to give Bevel that interim head coach title after Urban Meyer, after Matt Patricia. And those were 2 huge hires for both of those organizations. And I almost wonder if Mark looks at AP and goes, AP was an interim, ended up not being the right guy. Where Darrell Bevell, maybe he is the right guy for the job. Also the fact that Carroll is 74 at the start of the season, you got to be able to find a succession plan, whether that's Patrick Graham or whether that's Darrell Bevell. I think both of those people have a lot of respect in Pete Carroll's realm, and the only way that you're going to be able to hire somebody like Carroll is if Carroll goes into Tom Brady and Mark Davis and can prove, like, even if I'm successful, we're going to have a long-term plan. The long-term plan does make a lot of sense around Darrell Bevell. So all those reasons there are why I believe that he could be the next offensive coordinator for the Silver and Black. So one more time, I'll run through this quickly. Here's why I think Darrell Bevell could be hired to be the Raiders OC. Right now, he's the only name in terms that has actually interviewed for the job. He interviewed on January 28th. He's got a Pete Carroll connection, worked 7 years with him, ended up winning the Super Bowl ring from 2011 to 2017 in Seattle. Has worked with multiple quarterbacks like Tua, Trevor Lawrence, Matthew Stafford, Brett Favre tied into there, as well as Russell Wilson. Organization structure. It seems like the Raiders are trying to build everything from top to bottom. There needs to be structure, and Bevel and Carroll do think logically in the same way in that regard. He does have head coaching experience. 2 interim head coaching gigs. The Raiders wanted Cliff Kingsbury last season to be the head coach of the offense, and Darrell Bevell has some of that head coaching experience. For all those reasons is why I think he could be the next OC of the Raiders. So reminder, if the Raiders do end up hiring Bevel, we will be live for that video. I just want to say that. But then here's going to be the other question, Mitch. Well, if we hire Bevel, who the hell's going to be the quarterback? And that is a great, great question. And I'm going to stick with my 5 names that I'm just going to continue to roll with here, because the 5 names, and this is just what I think. This is not a report. This is me. If I was a betting man, the top 5 quarterbacks most likely to join Pete Carroll if Carroll ends up hiring Darren Bevel. Number 1 name is Russell Wilson. Geno and Sam Darnold, I think, are very close. Then there's a little bit of a tier gap there with Justin Fields and Kirk Cousins. But let's face the facts. If Pete brings in Bevel, I think their number one guy is going to be Russell Wilson.